Hey guys, what is going on? Thanks so much for watching the channel. Matt Smith here as always. Appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. You know the drill helps me out a ton, and I really appreciate it. First thing I want to do is start off by saying happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. Tons to be thankful for this year, especially if you're a Buffs fan. Definitely a tricky week and a tough week, and been a somber week. I can't lie to you. And the team has felt that as well. We'll get into some of those things, but tons to be thankful for, whether or not you're surrounded by friends and family or not. I've been on both sides of those coins before around the holidays. Just make sure that you're taking care of number one, because that is the most important part. You can't help anybody until you help yourself. Remember that. So, what has this last week been like? Okay, I think that's the question, right? Coming off that Kansas game, I've noticed from Buffs fans they really don't want to even hear it. They don't want to talk about it. They're devastated, and I think that's understandable. Everything was right in front of them, and Coach Prime even acknowledged as much this week. Like, he's feeling the same. The players are feeling the same way. I think the company line is there, that they're getting ready for Oklahoma State, but I've definitely noticed, that attitude, that they understood what they let slip last week. It's like somewhat putting on a brave face, kind of, but also understanding that there's more to go. But now they know they don't control it. And anytime you let your own destiny slip through your fingers and all you had to do was take care of your business, that's tough to deal with. And I think this week they're having that extra emotional hurdle of having to overcome some disappointment. And, as I went back and I looked over the film from the Kansas game, I think the most disappointing part for me was they didn't come to meet the moment energetically. Like, after the game, and I brought this up with Brian Howell. And by the way, if you don't watch the weekly show I do with Brian Howell on his channel, make sure you go subscribe to Brian Howell's channel on YouTube. We do a show every week. We break down everything. And, as I said to Brian, after the game and the post game recap, I said, there's some times where I felt like they kind of got outcoached in certain situations, and I do think that's the case. However, that wasn't why they lost. They lost because the effort level from the defense was just non-existent. I mean, the fact that they got bowled over the way that they did and allowed 330 whatever yards coming off a week where they allowed Utah just 30, that's so unacceptable. It is. However, when I say unacceptable, we're talking about in context of a team that we believe can compete for a Big 12 championship and a college football playoff berth. I told you that if this is a college football playoff team, they cover that spread against Kansas. Based upon the team that we had seen over the month before, I told you I felt like they were the alpha in this conference. Now, it just goes to show you, any given Saturday in college football, especially in this Big 12 conference, anything can happen. So overlooking anybody is a fool's errand. And maybe I felt, victim to part of that trap as well. I just thought that Colorado had kind of graduated past the level of being able to get beat like they did. Now, again, I think there's good news, bad news, right? The bad news, you absolutely blew that opportunity that you had to have. But the good news is that I don't think the stuff that they struggled with is going to take a lot to correct. I think a lot of this is just, guys, I really believe it's effort, energy, intensity level, and fight here. And I believe that we will see a renewed spirit tomorrow morning at Folsom. Now, it's going to be a chilly one, so you got to shake it off, shake off the Thanksgiving kind of lull there to get going and tune things up on Friday morning. It's supposed to be like under freezing at kickoff. I think 29 degrees. It'll warm up a little bit. I think high is only 40, though. So it will be a brisk game. And you figure with a brisker game, maybe you look more to the ground game. However, we found out this week Isaiah Gustev will not be playing in this one. He did suffer a hip injury early in that Kansas game, and I think he tried to play. I saw him come out early for the second half, but we find out this week from Coach Flea it's a hip injury, and they feel like they can't really trust him to protect himself right now, and so they don't know that it would be the safest situation to put him out there in. Now, that's a problem because he's been the only back on this team that's been productive all season long. Without Isaiah Gustev, they have not had a running game that works. In fact, the running game right now is one of the worst in the country. Again, if you look at their full season body of work, which obviously moving forward, that will need to be addressed. But now's not the time to get into all that. Now's the time to look at what you do tomorrow. And Coach Flea said this week that it'll be Micah Welch and Dallin Hayden who are 1 and 2. I'd like to throw this out there. I think Isaiah Hard should see a couple of carries. I think you need that little change of pace that he can provide to you. And I wouldn't be upset if Charlie Offerdahl got a couple of touches. This is a by committee approach to the ground game tomorrow. And I don't think the ground game needs to be perfect to beat Oklahoma State, but it's got to be somewhat serviceable. And I'm concerned that that will be the case because when Augusta is not played, it has not been. And so what does it look like? I don't know. Now, Oklahoma State's defense is the worst rush defense in the Big 12. And, Taj Brooks, I watched that game several different times last week. He had some success last week against them in Stillwater, Texas Tech did. So, look, I just don't know, even against the worst rushing defense in the Big 12, what Micah and Dallin are going to be able to stack together. And more than that, is their offensive line going to be able to generate a push in the run blocking game? One thing that I did, and it's clear as day when you cut on the tape against Kansas, is Kansas's O-line, their tight ends, their up backs, they put on a run blocking clinic. I mean, it was a clinic teaching tape of how to do it. Colorado really doesn't do that very often. And the concern here for me is that Isaiah makes a lot of things happen after first contact. Micah can do it. We haven't seen much evidence that Dallin can do it, which is why I think, they talk about the extension of the running game being those bubble screens and getting it out quick. And I think that's great. You got to keep that stuff in there too. I think just specifically the ways they run the football, like I said, I'd be looking to involve Hart. I'd be looking to involve Charlie a little bit. And hopefully you can see them go to the ground game if they get a decent sized lead in this one, and hopefully it's effective enough to grind down clock. But either way, I anticipate this to be a long morning for Shedeur Sanders. This one's going to be on him as well, based upon history. I'd like to see them change my mind on that, but based upon history, he's going to have to carry them to this win, at least offensively. Now, I don't think that's a problem for him, just something they're going to have to deal with, right? Kind of goes back to, you are one dimensional. And when you're one dimensional, you're easier to stop. So even the Big 12's worst rush defense and one of the worst defenses in the Big 12 can look decent if they know you're throwing the ball all the time. So Colorado's got to find a way to keep that defense off balance. And look, I don't know exactly the type of fight we'll see from the Buffs right away. This is one thing that I've been talking about all year long, and I think they've done okay with it at certain times, but I think everybody out there who's watched this team understands slow starts are hurting them. And I spoke about this with Brian this week, but especially on the road, we've gone on these road trips now, and every time these stadiums are keyed up to play the Buffs, these teams are keyed up to play the Buffs. That first drive against Kansas felt like the first drive against Texas Tech. The only difference in that first half being the Buffs allowed the hole to get to 17-0 instead of 13-0, and that was just a little bit too big to dig yourselves out of. But if Colorado does a better job setting a tone early, then it could have been a different game. And so while they did put up 21 points in 19 minutes, which by average is you'll take that, as Coach Prime said after the game, every day, every game. But the problem is sometimes games take different shapes and sizes and require different things, and sometimes you have to adapt and find different ways to win, and Colorado has been doing that. It's just getting out of the blocks fast offensively has been a bit tricky. So I'm really interested to see how they do that. I think we've been talking about this, drive starters, right? Easy ones, north and south. I think they're becoming slightly predictable. So I do hope Pat Shurmur has a few wrinkles in there, some more window dressing as far as pre-snap motion this week to make sure that, because he has found some stuff that's worked for this offense. This offense, I actually heard this number the other day. When they rush for over 100 yards, they're 5-0 this year. Pretty simple, right? Now, a lot of that has to do with a lot of their rushing yards, and some of those games came when they got a big lead. And I think that's a big part of this game against Oklahoma State, because we have to think about this. Oklahoma State's season is cooked. I mean, they're 0-8 in conference, they're 3-8. All they have to play for is an opportunity to play on national television, and I'm sure for those seniors, their last opportunity to suit it up for the Cowboys. So you definitely have some impactful players on that sideline that Colorado will have to account for. And, we talk about the Doak Walker winner from last year, the best running back in the country, Ollie Gordon. What was he, a 99 overall in college sports, the EA college game when it came out? I mean, Ollie Gordon is 6'2", 230. He's a horse. He is a little bit different than what Colorado has seen thus far. DJ Giddens, I'd say is probably the other biggest back they've had to deal with. But Gordon isn't as quick and agile, I would say, as Giddens. He's just powerful. And the other part about Oklahoma State's offense is they don't do a lot of that. What we saw from Kansas last week, where they're going to bring different guys to the backfield, motion them out, option, read option look. They'll do some, but it's more a traditional running attack, right? Line up and run right through you, which I think really benefits the Buffaloes. They struggle when they've got to start to, solve the puzzle before the line of scrimmage from time to time. And it's not easy to go against schemes like that, especially when you have players that can execute that stuff like Kansas does with those versatile tight ends and that stable of backs they have. Oklahoma State's not quite the same. They're going to really try and run right through you. Gordon averaged, 10.8 per carry last week. He had 3 touchdowns basically immediately at the start of the third quarter against Texas Tech last week in Stillwater. So they'll be focused on him. And if you can slow Gordon down, they do have a couple of players. Stripling on the outsides is a nice wide receiver, and they can move the ball around. They're going with the freshman quarterback who had his first career start last week. You'll see his name is M. Smith, but I promise you it's not me playing. He's taller than me, so it's a dead giveaway. Anyway, but this kid who actually, ironically enough, Adam Mustertiger, our buddy at buffstampede.com, told me earlier this week that he came to see you for an official. I went and I watched his game last week. He looked nice. I mean, made some nice throws, hung in the pocket, did a good job moving the football down the field. Texas Tech's defense isn't great, but that's one thing Oklahoma State did last week. When you see and you go back and you watch that game, it's just, hey, man, they just keep motoring. They just motored it down the field, and they did enough to put up 48 points. So make sure that you have the requisite amount of respect that, okay, it may be a true freshman in his, second career start or what have you, but they got some players who can put up some points. Tech's defense isn't great, but Colorado's defense wasn't great last week either. I expect them to rebound. I do. But you've got to have plenty of respect, because I think there's one thing we learned from last week, and they didn't respect Kansas enough. And that was a problem. And certainly I was, I'll raise my hand as a part of somebody who didn't respect Kansas enough. But Kansas's O-line and those tight ends, man, they won them the football game. They won them the football game, point blank, period. And Colorado not being able to get out of the blocks and run the football themselves also helped them. That's the other part of it is I think Colorado's, like 3-3 when they're under 100 yards rushing, 5-0 over 100 yards, and 3-3 under 100 yards rushing. That's what I've been saying all year. My barometer for this team is, I mean, if you've been watching the channel, you know that 120 yards, they will win every game. En route to a national championship. Unfortunately, the last 3 games, they have not been able to get the ground game going whatsoever. They've reverted back many ways offensively to kind of like Shedeur, Travis, or nothing. Shepard got involved, LeJonte's got involved, and I don't think they're going to have Jimmy Horn again. I know they really wanted him to, but I watched him in practice. He isn't ready yet. And for Jimmy, what he's got coming up, it's way, way too important for him to stay healthy. He'll play in the bowl game, I imagine. So I don't really have any concerns about that one, but he's got to be right. And Coach Prime wouldn't put him out there in a bad spot as much as he wants to see him get out there, because unfortunately, the senior year for Jimmy probably didn't go the way he thought it would with the injury and, maybe a little bit of a lack of involvement after the North Dakota State game. So I think they feel bad about that and they want to make amends for it. But at the same time, you got to do what's best for the player. And they always do. They have a proven track record. If you're hurt, we're not putting you in a situation to hurt yourself even further. Now, talking about injuries, we mentioned Augusta won't play. Sounds like Preston Hodge isn't going to go either, which is really a shame. Preston would have been his last game at Folsom Field. 1 year, the transfer out of Liberty. He's been one of the guys I've enjoyed watching the most on this football team. What a special season for a corner 2 or 3. I mean, CB3. I mean, hell of a year for Preston Hodge. And it just goes to show you Colorado does have one of the best cornerback rooms in the country. Nobody shredded them through the air. Nobody. And obviously losing Travis next year, it's going to look different, and Preston will be the same. But Hood has stepped up nicely, and McKinney has been quietly very, very good, at least quietly because of Travis mostly. But next year, he'll have the keys. He'll be the number 1 guy. So, look, I don't expect Oklahoma State to throw the ball all over the yard, but they're going to be desperate and they're going to take chances because they have nothing to lose. So if you're not careful, you can get beat. Like that play by Zach Wilson on the go ball to, Dorian Singer that was Travis's only allowed touchdown reception all year long. You're going to throw some of those. So those guys in the back end got to be ready, right? Um, and look, it goes back to Gordon. I think if you can stay sound in your gap assignments and wrap up. This is not the week for hitting high and for big hits. This is the week for dragging this big dude to the ground. Period. That's it. Okay. And Colorado did have some missed tackles last week for sure, which was, in my opinion, the biggest reason why Neal ran all over him. So many different times they're in position to make a play and they didn't make the play. That's what we saw against Kansas State, too. Oklahoma State can present some of the same issues, but they run the ball a little bit differently. So I don't think they're constantly trying to get you to the boundary. It's going to be more about running between the tackles because Gordon is, as I said, 6'2", 230 and a horse. I mean, he can do that. And this is a big one for Hill Green and Bentley, two seniors to end on the right note. And I think if I had to highlight any two guys tomorrow, it's probably them. The front's got to play better, but they will against this Oklahoma State line, in my opinion. Chidozie Nwankwo, another senior, has been awesome in 1 year. He's been just about everything that they could have hoped, outside of missing a couple of, was it a game and a half or something like that, where they didn't really miss a beat because of the depth on that defensive line. But when he's in there, it makes a big difference. And obviously taken last week out of the equation because it wasn't a good week for anybody. Nobody brought it last week. So, Anquin Barnes has stepped up nicely. We did also hear that Amari McNeil will not play, which is unfortunate. I wasn't aware that was even, someone who's dealing with an injury, but sounds like he's out. Hopefully we see him back for the bowl game. He'll be a big part of this team next year, assuredly. Other things that I want to bring up, I got to give Colorado's offensive line some credit. They have not been good in the running game, and 2 years in, they still can't buy a yard or two if they need it. But you've got to give them credit because they are asked to do one of the toughest jobs in the country because Shedeur likes to extend plays and extend plays and extend plays. The problem is you kind of hang those guys out to dry every now and again and make them pass block for like 30 seconds. And you really don't see a lot of holding penalties when you typically would under scenarios like that. And, I would say they have lopped the pressure number significantly from last year, although it's still not the strength of the team. It still needs to get better, still needs to be a focus this offseason. Yet significantly improved, and we all know what you can do when Shedeur has enough time. Let's just see. Talked about the scheme a little bit becoming obvious. I think Pat Shurmur did a really good job figuring out some solutions to some of the problems they had early in the season. They got Smalls on the field. They went 11, kind of that motion into that inline look where then they run the ball with the gusto, sometimes have a pistol. They just haven't added a layer to that afterwards. And now it's been solved for the most part, in my opinion, by these opposing teams. So what do you do then? Where's your counter then? And that part I've been waiting for. I assumed they'd have some more of those. But when Augusta went out, they've had such lack of success running the football. I didn't even mind that they bailed on it for the most part because I think we have enough of a sample size to know that if you're down to Dallin and Micah, you're probably just not going to have a good running game. So maybe they have a big one tomorrow. There's some other media folks that think they will. I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that one. I think that's going to be an issue for them tomorrow against Oklahoma State, but we'll see. We'll see. How do you deal with the tone setting, right? Oklahoma State doesn't have anything to play for, except for, as I brought up, this is ABC game, Black Friday, huge showcase for all the seniors, okay? It's time for Colorado to set a tone in a game, right? Set a tone in a game a la kind of what you did against Cincinnati, right? I think about that, and even against North Dakota State to a degree. It's time for Colorado's offense in the first half to look a little bit fluid. And I'm curious to see if they can figure out how to get it done because they've been talking about it all year. And I think they've had some good first halves. It's just like first and second drive. It's not nearly where it should be because I think a lot of those are even turning out to be 3-and-outs versus, just being able to move the ball. And again, it's just more about setting the tone in the game than it is being able to dig out of the hole. Understand that. There's a team that's more than capable of digging out and making comebacks. They almost dug out of a 17-0 hole last week. It just came up that short. So we'll see. We'll see how it looks tomorrow. Other things to note from the Kansas game. Let me just go over here, make sure the officiating was But we'll move on. A couple things from this week that Travis did not get nominated for the Thorpe Award. Earmuffs, kids. Are you fucking kidding? Are you kidding? Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame. Way to ruin your award. And why do college football awards not have a unified process? Why is the Oklahoma Sports Hall of Fame selecting that? Way to go. Way to go. I'm pausing for dramatic effect to once again remind everyone how ridiculous it was. Travis, not the best defensive back. All right, you want to give it to somebody else? Give it to somebody else. Not a finalist. I just felt bad for Travis because Travis deserves to be honored like that. And there's a lot of idiots online right now who are trying to discredit him. And those people obviously don't watch the games. And those people obviously have an agenda against Colorado because if you're a football fan and you can even find a way to root against Travis Hunter, you are as lame as it gets. I don't know what to say. This guy, we've never seen anything like it before. He's a tremendous person. He's just a wicked athlete. He is lightning with the football every time it touches his hands, and even when it doesn't. So I don't get that one. I don't get that. I was as mad as Coach Prime was when I heard about it. I maybe not as mad to the point where, had I had a Thorpe Award, I would have just told them, basically, this means nothing to me now. Congratulations, you idiots. That's why Coach Prime was so upset. It hurt him because that award meant something to him. And then for them to just go out there and say, oh, no, actually, this guy who's clearly the best defensive back in the country, we're not even going to recognize him. It's like, great. Sounds good. Throw this right in the trash. He is going to give it to Travis, he said, which, I mean, Travis deserves it. I mean, might as well, like, underneath Deion Sanders, just get the trophy maker, just go take it to a trophy, one of those shops and have him grind out, whatever else is under Deion Sanders and put Travis on, or they could share it. Just ridiculous. You got to start quicker tomorrow because I think you can jump on Oklahoma State and kind of take some of their will out of it. This is a chippy team, by the way. Don't be surprised if you see some undisciplined stuff. Ollie Gordon at the end of the game last week just straight up punched one of Texas Tech's defensive linemen in the face mask. Side note, how dumb is that? Punching dudes in the face mask. That is one of the stupidest things about football. I've never understood that. If you were that mad, why would you ever punch someone in the helmet? That is the dumbest thing. Anyway, yeah, I think that's pretty good about just kind of my thoughts here overall. Look, I'm hopeful. Okay, I'm hopeful that this team has a ninth life for the college football playoff. I am. I'm really more interested in seeing them finish strong because they deserve to. Yeah, they tripped up last week. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, it sucked for everybody. Players, staff, coaches, administration, student body, fans, everybody. And even national folks around the country. ESPN, it sucks for. So while that's all true, you've got to finish on a high note because you don't want to leave people with that type of taste in their mouths. Not to mention, if you want a chance to get in, you got to win. That should be motivation enough. And then you let the chips fall where they may. But if you do want to get in, you do have to win. And I would approach it with the requisite respect that it deserves. You have an experienced team, a veteran-laden team. There will be plenty of time here if they don't make the college football playoff between now and the bowl game to talk about the senior class, to talk about everybody. The one thing I would say, though, is I know it's Black Friday. I know it's a 10 a.m. kickoff. I normally don't say things like this, but to the fans, you have been a very long-suffering fan base. All of the things that you have been asking for, by and large, Coach Prime has delivered to you in 2 years. I know today's Thanksgiving. I know you're probably going to be tired. I know you're probably going to still be full in the morning. I know some of you, I know a lot of you are still going to be hungover. A little hair of the dog that bit you. Get up and make sure you're in your seats early to honor these guys for senior day. The 10 a.m. kickoff on the last game is unfortunate for that reason, in my opinion. And this is the group responsible for turning around Colorado football. I don't know how long, decades maybe it lasts, 5 years, 10 years. But for right now, this is the group that took this program from death's doorstep and revived it. And they deserve to be honored as such because I know a lot of you watching this video as well felt as same as I did after 2022 that we weren't sure that that was going to happen. So make sure you get there and show up early for these guys because I mean, it's the last time a lot of you are going to get to see Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter play in person, not to mention Cam and Shiloh and everybody. As soon as I start going through the list, I'm going to miss somebody. LeJonte and Will and I don't know, Jimmy and the whole cast and crew. A lot of these guys are moving on. And it wasn't that long ago that Buffs fans had to watch Maddox Kopp and Drew Carter and Brendan Lewis and, all these Sam Noyer and all these guys come through the program. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the best quarterback to have ever put on the black and gold came to Colorado. And then the best non-quarterback to have ever played in the program came to Colorado. That was nothing anybody expected. And so, if anything, I do hope those of you that are showing up tomorrow are going to make yourselves heard for them, all of them, because they absolutely deserve it. And I'm looking forward to seeing this team hopefully finish on a big note. And it's time. It's time. You can feel what is that line from The Hustler? Feeling sorry for yourself is the sport of born losers. Yeah, that's it. Don't feel sorry for yourself. Go up and do something about it. And I hope that's the effort that we see from the Buffs tomorrow. Again, I appreciate everybody as I always say every week, thanks so much for tuning in. It does mean the world. I'm very thankful for you this Thanksgiving. And if you're with family, make sure you take the time to let them know rather how you feel about them. Because this life game, man, you never know what's going to come around the corner. So cherish every moment you can. And we certainly will tomorrow at Folsom Field. Again, appreciate everybody for tuning in. Like and subscribe. Just do it. Takes like 2 seconds. Matt Smith, we'll see you later.